Welcome back to Collecting Issues, your monthly comic book club, where this week we'll be taking a look at All-Star Superman collecting issues 1 to 12 of the 2006 series by Grant Morrison, bloody Frank Quitely, and colorist Jamie Grant. Ooh, ah.
So the comic book education continues?
We're talking inappropriate comic books.
You're into comic books, aren't you?
That's comic book shit.
Like in the comic books.
Oh, we're going with that, are we? We're keeping that intro. We've been on an almost year and a half long hiatus from Collecting Issues, the formerly bi-weekly comic book club, but now monthly comic book club, which is much easier but considerably less fun to say. And that's the intro we're
Yes.
going with, is it?
That's it. We're sticking it. That's
All
it.
right.
Fumbled the bag. Ladies and gentlemen, if that kind of shoddy intro work is something you enjoy, you might enjoy this bloody podcast. And if you enjoy this bloody podcast, give us a review. As Mike says, we're here after nearly a year and a half, Michael.
Yeah. We took a break, Benjamin. We reevaluated ourselves. And we said to ourselves, we should probably read some comic books if we're going to keep doing this. So we took a little break to read some comic books.
Yeah, we did that, Michael. I said, I'm going to take a hiatus and take a little dip into Lake Me. And you know what I found after a year and a half of introspection, Michael?
Fucking, you got soaked anyway.
I'm more of a puddle in a drought. Very shallow. Very shallow.
Very shallow. The shallowest man
Very
I've ever
shallow
met, Benjamin.
indeed.
I'm surprised you don't have a little mustache and a little comb that you keep to trim your little mustache.
I actually do, Michael.
Yeah.
You quite often catch me, ladies and gentlemen, on public transport trimming my mustache. But that's not what we're here to talk about. Well,
is it?
That's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about when I pitched this, Michael,
Yes,
coming back. When I pitched Collecting Issues coming back, I said, let's do it fucking properly this time.
Yeah. So what are we doing now?
Yeah.
Why are we fucking it?
We're not at all.
Oh, this is
Michael.
it,
It's
is
a
it?
bit of preamble.
This is okay.
It's a little bit of preamble.
very good.
Yeah. But ladies and gentlemen, we call ourselves the monthly comic book club, but it's not really much without a community. So we've set up a special Discord that you'll find linked in the description of every episode, and you can join on there and read along with us, because the new format we've come up with, Michael, is that we're going to read a comic book a month. And that means that we'll only record the episode at the end of each month after you, our precious reading community, have given your 2 cents.
Very good. Benjamin, I've been giving you a little hand gesture here down the bottom of the screen for the video version so that you can put links.
Yeah, you'll find it where Mick's hand is waving up and down. Speaking of, Michael.
What is it?
Bloody October's read is a big spooky one, and I'm telling the listeners now so they can get their monies out and buy it so they can read along with us. You know what it's called?
We're doing the comics industry a real solid with that, aren't we, Benjamin? Go and buy these comics.
We are.
For God's sake.
Go support the comics that you like, ladies and gentlemen, or read in whatever way you can, provided it's legal. Because as the Irish adage goes, you wouldn't steal a car, ladies and gentlemen.
I think that's pretty international, that's pretty international, that I add, Benjamin. But also, Benjamin, if buying isn't owning, then pirating isn't stealing. But look, that's neither here nor there, because what is next month? Sorry, it's monthly. It's the monthly comic book club. What is next month's comic book?
Michael, it's October next month because it's currently September 2024. So we picked something spooky. We went for The Nice House on the Lake by James Tynion IV.
Oh, James Tynion IV. Our mate, James Tynion IV.
Yes. James Tynion IV, Michael.
You're showing us, are you?
His, well, I'll probably grab it here, Michael, just because it's convenient. Look at that.
Gorgeous.
Look at that for a hefty, spooky tome.
Gorgeous.
Ladies and gentlemen, there's a gloss dust jacket on this, and you can't see shit.
There is.
For the auto listeners.
That's great.
But it's by James Tynion IV, or the fourth, if you want to say it properly, and Alvaro Martinez Bueno is the artist on that one.
Oh, very good.
Yeah, and it's a classic spooky deconstruction of horror tropes, Michael, and it's bloody good. But Michael,
what is it?
We're not here to talk about that this month, because this month we're dealing with All-Star Superman.
Benjamin, I was both shocked and appalled when I checked the publication dates of this comic book and found out it came out in 2005. Absolutely horrified. This is a 19-year-old comic book. I still think of this as new.
Michael, I still see this as a modern take on Superman. It's 20 years out of date.
It's 20 years out of date and has influenced so many Superman takes since then, including, we're led to believe,
Yeah.
the upcoming Superman film from your mate and mine, Sweaty Dave.
Yeah, Jaime Guns. Yeah, Sweaty Dave.
Yeah, isn't that?
David Corrin Sweat, I think is.
Yeah, oh, sorry. Yeah.
I
Well,
don't
I
know.
call him Sweaty Dave.
That's.
We're old mates.
I mean, in some ways, Michael, this is kind of a perfect Superman comic for adaptation.
Go on.
In that, when this was brought out, it is a standalone Superman series, and by that I mean it's set in its own little universe. Now, it's not an Elseworlds title, Michael.
Mm.
Not that. It's not that. It is, in fact, an all-star title. And the all-star title is a now ill-fated initiative that DC came up with around the year 2003. This was something that then bloody editor-in-chief Dan Didio, old Dan Diddies,
Double D's, we call him.
Double D, as we call him in the industry.
Yeah.
He came up with this concept of kind of paring it all down. Himself and a few of the heavy hitters of DC Comics at the time sat down and they were just kind of catching their breath. The first whisperings of the All-Star movement, Michael, came about in the year 2000. And it was kind of an attempt to, ring in the new millennium. And in true comic book fashion, it was 6 years late.
Yep.
It was, in some ways, a bit of a tonic used to address what had been the 90s and the darkest era for superheroes, where we couldn't have kind of pure superheroics. They had to be gritty and
Pouches.
kind of an anti-hero of sorts. Pouches, Michael. Oh, pouches.
Also,
as far as the
Benjamin,
eye could
in a
see.
sense, very much a good, not a jumping on point for comics, but a classic comic book series in the sense you could just pick it up and not be super worried about what's going on in the extended universe.
Yeah, that is one of the absolutely fabulous things about this one, Michael, is that it is, I think that this is a spectacular jumping on point for people.
I don't think it is.
Um,
It's not a jumping on point.
oh,
It's just a self-contained thing. It's not a jumping on point.
don't you?
You can't keep reading this. It's discreet.
Yes, it's 12 issues, Michael,
Yeah.
and it's done.
And after you've collected those 12 issues, you can either go and read the normal Superman comics or just recognize that you're fucked.
I, unfortunately, would probably recognize that you're fucked because this is very good, Michael. This is peak Superman. This is bang tidy.
Well, don't spend your load because we're not quite there yet. But yeah, it's
Not quite there yet.
yeah, we're not quite there. It's you said it's not Elseworlds. What's different between Elseworlds and All-Star? Because it feels Elseworlds. And explain what that means,
I
Ben,
think
for the less informed listeners.
So, in general, there are in the big two being DC Comics and Marvel Comics, Michael. Every once in a while, I would imagine writers sit down to their long runs on established characters and go, "Oh, fuck me, I'm exhausted.
I can't
Jesus
do
Christ, this
any
is."
more sad Matt Murdock.
I don't want to write another tragedy for Peter Parker.
I'm sick of his
know-
wife.
Dan Slott aside, Michael, we'll get into that on another podcast. But I think as a result of those long running kind of continuity laden things, two kind of beautiful quantum ideas emerged from that. For DC, or for Marvel, it was the What If comics, Michael, now immortalized by the Disney Plus cartoon anthology. What If?
Yeah. What if this was an average animated series?
And these were way more popular in the late 70s and 80s when people were going, "Oh, what if Spider-Man had the power of the living tribunal?" Oh. And that was fine and dandy. And those are usually one-shots for Marvel. And then DC came up with their Elseworlds concept. And it was, what if the big spooky Batman who loves the Gothic and dresses up in heavy leather was actually a vampire?
Oh.
And then we got things like Batman Crimson Mist. And the big difference, I think, between the What If kind of iteration of Marvel's attempt at this and DC's is Marvel went for one-shots, DC went for miniseries. So you'd get limited series runs in the Elseworlds. And Michael, this is, in spirit, very much an Elseworlds kind of gig.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But for marketing purposes, it's All-Star
Yeah,
Superman.
yeah. You can claim it's Elseworlds. You can claim it's not Elseworlds all you want. Fucking is though. It is.
It is Elseworlds,
It
though.
is. Shut up.
The All-Star, as I foreshadowed a little bit earlier in this episode, Michael, the All-Star initiative at DC was supposed to be a simplifying of the DC superhero mythos. But really, there are only two major titles in the running, as there often are at DC when they're kind of spearheading a new wave. And that was the Batman and the Superman titles.
Yeah.
They got the All-Star treatment. And one of them, this one, was a resounding success. It is arguably one of the most defining runs in Superman's long, long history.
No, Super
right?
Hands. You were right the first time.
in Superman's long running history. And the other one, Michael, was All Star Batman by legend of the Batman genre, Frank Miller, and legend of Batman art, Jim Lee. Unfortunately, that was fucking awful.
Rubbish.
And cancelled after 6 issues.
Yeah, rubbish altogether. How Frank Miller, Jim Lee, rubbish Batman doesn't make any sense. But that's not what we're here to talk about, Benjamin. Ben.
Yeah.
Come here, look.
What?
Can I tell you a little bit of a secret?
Go on.
No great Superman fan am I.
Okay, that's fair. Why?
Look, it's not that I dislike Superman. I don't dislike Superman. But I think, as with all things, this is an age thing. I am 42 soon, Benjamin. 42 soon.
Oh!
And that means I was born and I grew up in the early 80s. And the Superman film, which is beloved of people older than me with sore hips, is from the late 70s and was a massive point of success for Superman. Huge generational impact of the original Superman movie. The beginning of superhero films. The first real cinematic superhero film, let's be honest. Massive.
Yeah.
But when I was growing up, that was a little bit old hat. When you're an 8-year-old in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, you don't want to be watching movies from the 70s. Because
yeah, that's fair.
I'm watching cool shit and I'm reading cool boy comics like the X-Men. I'm balls deep in the X-Men. I'm not worried about some boring blue guy flying around who can do more or less anything and not be hurt.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, okay.
So,
fair.
No great Superman fan. I don't think I read a Superman comic until I was well into my 20s. The Superman animated series, which came later, was good-ish.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I don't think I really now, Ben, this is on a personal level, so I'm not taking any flack back for this. I didn't really develop any interest in the Superman character until the Justice League Unlimited cartoon.
Oh, that's completely fair. I mean, a pretty solid characterization in Justice League Unlimited. Pretty big. And look, Michael, in terms of accusations of the flying brick archetype.
Go on.
Superman is the crown wearer of that archetype. The flying brick, ladies and gentlemen, is a common slur chucked at superheroes who have the classic set of super durable, super strong, flies around, saves the day.
Maybe has a
flying
laser.
Bricks. Maybe has a laser. And I think, Superman is monumentally powerful, Michael. Like, he is incomprehensibly powerful.
All right.
Right? Within the comics universe. Nobody beats Superman unless they come up with a clever way of taking him out early on. They'll either jeopardize a civilian, they'll lash some kryptonite onto him if they can get their fucking hands on it. But usually it's jeopardy. They'll put civilians in jeopardy and Superman will be forced to make the big moral choice. And I think probably for a lot of writers, it's very daunting to take on Superman as a character because he is just so powerful. And Grant Morrison has handled the approach to Superman differently to how anyone else has approached it, I think, in this run.
Mm. There's a
Mm.
hot take for you.
Mm. Well, I don't think it's a hot take, Michael. I think it's now a very recognized part of the Superman mythos that this is pretty good at both humanizing and mythologizing Superman equally in a spectacular fashion.
Benjamin,
And I
before
was doing a little,
before
yes.
you fly off on this topic, the whole point here was I was hoping you might tell me your relationship to Superman.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair,
You
Michael.
know, I was kind of
My
going off this
relationship to
running
Superman,
order that you've written. Fucking
I deserve that, Michael.
like
That's
herding
fair.
cats doing this podcast.
That's fair. That's fair, Michael. Look, my relationship to Superman, I think, is that seminal bloody movie.
Yeah, all right.
Stop it.
Your relationship to Superman is seminal. That'll do. That's all the listeners need to know.
That's all you needed. That's all you needed. Look, my relationship to this original movie, Michael, is Christopher Reeve, bloody Marlon Brando, Gene Hackman, Margot Kidder, all lashing about in the bizarre 1978 film that came out from Richard Donner. And I think I watched that with one of my grandfathers once upon a time. And I remember the defining thing for me was that bloody score by John Williams.
Can we hum
The
it?
dun,
Can
dun,
we,
dun, 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 dun.
can we hum it,
I don't
or
know
will
if we'll
we
get
get
taken down for
copyright struck now?
that.
Very good. I think that's Indiana Jones you're doing, Ben.
I probably am. Yeah, look, could be either or. But that was my kind of introduction to it, and I suppose in terms of a Cliff Notes version of the character, that film's as good as any because in that
Yes.
he is capable of just about anything that you can set your mind to, including,
Yeah.
but not limited to, turning back time.
Turning back time by flying the
Um,
wrong way around the planet. There's no wrong way around the planet, Ben. That doesn't make any sense.
doesn't make any fucking sense. But
Yes.
it was my introduction to the character. And even I remember going, sure, how are you supposed to beat him? How are you supposed to fucking how are you
Push,
supposed to kick him?
push his wife off a cliff and then rob a bank while he's distracted.
Yeah, classic. You know? But yeah, like it did get very tough in that regard. And I think that movie really adapts the Silver Age Superman. And I think for a very long time, for a lot of comic book fans, that's what Superman is. When you think of Superman, you think of that 1950s era bloody big blue Boy Scout, the infallible man from another world who can do anything and uphold truth, justice, and sadly, the American way.
Yeah, he can point his fingers
Um,
at you and little tiny Supermen fly out and beat you up.
yeah, that happens in this very comic, but we'll get to that in a little bit, Michael. Yeah, I mean, Silver Age Superman is pretty huge, Michael. The history of Superman himself, he has been the epitome of comic books, I think, for a very long time. If you were to ask a crowd of 100 people to name a superhero
Iron Man.
or name the top 5 superheroes. Actually, yeah, do you know what, Michael? I could be wrong there. These days it would probably be Marvel characters.
Yeah.
Maybe.
If you got the old Gen Zers,
Maybe
Ben,
you're
you know
right.
the old Gen Zers that are always on the internet. They've never even heard of Superman.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you're a Gen Zer and you want to be part of a monthly comic book club, why don't you just click on the Discord down below
Hop
there?
up on the
and give
Discord.
us
You
your
can install it
opinions.
on your mobile phone.
Yeah, that thing that you Gen Zers love
Oh,
so
you
much.
love it
Michael
so
and myself,
much.
of course.
Just install it next. Have a little button next to your TikTok, and you can sometimes accidentally press it while you're trying to do your TikToks.
Oh, that's it. It's interesting that you say that, Michael. You could just circumvent that altogether and follow us on TikTok because we're up there as well.
Very
Go
good.
find Collecting Issues
Congratulations
on TikTok. It's
Gen
linked
Z.
below in the description.
What were you saying?
Go have a look. Sorry, what I was saying was, he is or would have been prior to the wave of Marvel movies that we're now all drowning in. He would have been the household name for superheroes would have been Superman.
He was first, Ben.
And it kind of. So, I mean, it's impossible to go any further, Michael, without us talking about Superman as a character.
Oh, go on.
So, he's a product of 2 young fellas creating a superhero in their bedrooms.
Yep. The SS, we call them.
Oh, Jesus Christ, we certainly don't, Michael, because they are two gentlemen of Jewish heritage.
Oh, no. Oh, that's
It's Jerry.
unfortunate.
It's Jerry's. Yeah, it's really unfortunate. I'm going to edit that out, I think. Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster came up with this character, Michael. And he actually came about very early on in the early 1930s. Jerry Siegel was working at the time in comic books, and he was a massive science fiction fan. And he met Joe Shuster, who was the artist on it. And they loved science fiction and pulp magazines, and especially pulp heroes like Buck Rogers and Tarzan and those kind of characters that were huge. And they wanted to create a superhero, essentially, because superheroes were just beginning to enter the public imagination in a big way. And he was actually the Superman that we know today was actually originally conceived as a villain of sorts.
Oh, go on.
Michael,
Like Nietzsche's Superman.
Yeah, the Ubermensch, the one you don't want to run into, Michael. And he was in a short story that Siegel wrote called The Reign of the Superman. And that was in 1933. And interestingly, Michael, that was about a bald man who gained psychic powers through a laboratory experiment. And we'll get on to Lex Luthor a little bit later,
Oh,
Michael.
I thought you meant me.
No, not when I'm wearing my trusty podcasting helmet, so you can't read my thoughts and steal my bits. Very good, very good. But come here to me. He liked the idea, hated the short story in the end, and actually took it away and decided to develop it into more of a mythological superhero, something like Hercules or
Samson.
something like Zorro, John Carter of Mars, the big pulp heroes of the time.
The Phantom.
The Phantom, exactly, Michael. One of them. So by the time they got to 1934, Siegel and Schuster had been working away on this particular character, and they had come up with all the concepts that they wanted around it. The alien planet, the baby sent to Earth by human parents, and a character who grows up to protect people with these incredible powers that he has. And they actually tried a whole bunch of times, Michael, to get him picked up by comic book publishers at the time and pulp magazines at the time. And every last one of them said, "Get the fuck out of here. Why would I want to publish a flying brick?"
But he couldn't fly then, Benjamin. This is a famous
No,
aspect
Michael.
of Superman.
Very good. He could, however, leap tall buildings in a single bound. However, they'd been pitching this character about the town, Michael, the town being the entire continent of America
Yes.
at the time.
Bolivia.
And eventually, in 1938, 4 years after they developed their pitch for him, they approached National Allied Publications, which was the original name for DC Comics.
Go on.
And at the time, there was a fella on there, the editor of the entire comic book company, Vin Sullivan. Now, I'm guessing that was an Irishman by any other name.
Oh,
Michael.
Vinny.
I'm just going to say that
we know
anyway.
him well. Yeah, Vinny Souls, we call him.
Now, for the Vinny Souls, so for the purposes of dramatic retelling, Michael, I'm going to say do him as an old Dublin man.
Oh, very good.
Sitting in a pub from this point on, and he was actually looking to launch a brand new title. So he was looking around. He was like, I want to publish a bloody title for superheroes. That's what I want. I want a big superhero title. That's what I'd like. I want comics full of action. And one of his deputy editors said, like, Action Comics. Yeah, Action Comics. That's great. Let's do that. Yeah, find me some people that fit Action Comics. And that was my impression of Vinnie Sullivan. And it's going to go away now. You'll never hear it again.
I don't know. I enjoyed it. Point a plane for Vinny Sullivan.
Yeah, point a plane's your only man. And Superman's your only hero. But anyway, he was launching this just as Siegel and Schuster came in the door pitching a flying brick in primary colors, and he went, "Yeah, give me that!" And they stuck it in there. And finally, in Action Comics #1 in June 1938, Superman made his first appearance. Famously, Michael, lifting an entire car above his head and cracking it down on some gangsters' heads.
We've all seen it.
We've all seen it, Michael. It is the first issue kind of cover, if you want.
Benjamin, there's not a person alive.
Michael. Look how my lighting has changed.
There's not a person alive who hasn't seen it, Benjamin. Don't summon it forth. We've all seen it. Have you jazzed it in? Is it
Little
in?
audio.
Is it in the video?
It'll be in there now,
All
Michael.
right.
It'll be in the video
Well,
now,
that's
Michael.
against my
I've done
wishes,
it
but
now.
look, what can we do?
If I listened to your wishes, Michael, we'd never do anything.
Very good.
We'd never do anything. Now, when he debuted, Michael, as a character, he did fucking everything. He could leap, he could X-ray, he was pretty invulnerable. He had his secret identity, even though an omnipotent kind of super being probably wouldn't need one. But he was Clark Kent, the mild-mannered reporter, and that made him kind of relatable. He used to fight for truth and justice, both on the page and off it, as
Oh.
Superman. And he became a bit of a cultural phenomenon, Michael, and he became the poster boy of what we now refer to as the golden age of comic books. And he got his own, he was so successful, Michael, that he got his own comic book run from 1939 onwards. So it only took him a year to become a bit of a comic book sensation. And then he got his own thing. But he then becomes the sort of boilerplate for lots of superheroes around that time, but primarily the moral compass of superheroes. This kind of big blue Boy Scout, heavily moral storytelling became very, very popular.
Very good. You were in the dark there, Benjamin. It was like you were telling a Halloween horror story.
Ooh, I should probably do something to stabilize my light. Michael, spin your wheels while I get some kind of lighting.
No, I absolutely will not. Keep going.
Anyway,
Yes.
that was all well and good. The golden age went really well for him, Michael, but where he really kind of reached a stratospheric level of popularity outside of comic books and became kind of a national symbol for the United States was from the mid 1950s onwards.
What we call these days, Benjamin, the Silver Age.
The silver age of comics, Michael, where comics followed the bloody pasta cooking method of writing, where they threw everything at the wall to see what feckin' stuck.
Super intelligence.
Super intelligence. Oh, super calculation. Whatever you wanted. Basically, Superman became a bit of a Rolodex of superpowers, and whatever that week's mission called for, that's what he got. That's all he needed. That's all Superman needed at that time was whatever the mission called for. Suddenly, he had the ability to do that. Did you know that Superman could turn his internal molecules into, I don't know, titanium if he needs to, steal his insides? One I always remember, Michael, is Lois Lane needs a blood transfusion. And it turns out that Superman's blood conforms to all known blood types.
Of course it does. Yeah, because he's Superman,
Um,
Benjamin. It's
'cause
obvious.
he's Superman. Yeah. And I think for this comic, for All-Star Superman, the Silver Age influence cannot be understated. This All-Star Superman, Grant Morrison's All-Star Superman, is Silver Age Superman. Just modernized to a new level.
Silver Age Superman.
He is that character.
Silver Age Superman, but forced to conform to modern storytelling styles. So in Silver Age
Yeah.
Superman, whatever writer was doing Superman that week could just invent a power without any explanation and it would never be seen again. And that was fine because that's how storytelling worked in comics back then. Every issue was basically a one-shot. This idea that developed during that time period and kind of as a result of that time period of everything is canon, everything is sequential, and yet time doesn't move forward and everyone lives in this bizarre limbo of never progressing but also progressing. And comics are weird. And one of the things
Yeah.
that Benjamin, put the lights on for God's sake. It's like I'm speaking to the
Sorry.
deceased. There you go. Good man.
I'm going to get a light. Spin your wheels.
But
Spin your wheels.
But then this
I'm going to get a light.
No, get back here. Just leave something white on your screen. Oh, he's taking his headphones off, the son of a bitch. Anyway, comic book fans love and hate the continuity idea of comic books. They love and hate the idea of everything is important, everything matters, and if something's a one shot or an Elseworld or an All-Star, then it doesn't matter. And if it doesn't matter, why am I wasting my time reading it? Because I'm only care about things that matter, things that have an effect, things that have a lasting impact. Really, one of the huge successes of the most recent huge thing in comics, the MCU, was the fact that for fans, everything felt important and everything felt connected and nothing felt like disjointed one shots. So part of the kind of shock of how good this is that it makes you forget that. It makes you forget about continuity and it makes you forget about lasting impact. It's just, here's a good story about Superman. And if anyone comes at you and says, well, actually, this contradicts what Superman said in Action Comics 436, so shut up. Shut up or I'll push you down the stairs like Superman's wife. You see what I'm saying?
It is, yeah, it's mercifully free of the chains of continuity, Mike.
But Benjamin, you're saying the chains of continuity. Continuity is one of the reasons that modern comics became such a cultural juggernaut because people love that shit. People love this issue of this comic book matters, and this issue of this comic book is going to have an impact. Think about the lowest rated comic book stuff we've seen over the last few years, like the MCU series Echo. One of the biggest criticisms
classic.
of the MCU series Echo was this doesn't matter. Nobody asked for it. It doesn't impact anything. It doesn't affect the rest of the universe. So this is I love this take of this comic book that here are 12 issues of a Superman story. Take it or leave it.
Yeah, I mean, it's, again, I suppose it conforms beautifully to what they wanted to do with All Star. And it just so happened to be a perfect vehicle for that time in Grant Morrison's own life as well. I think it has a beautiful blend of take it or leave it, but it also has, and as I mentioned at the top of this episode, Michael, it's a very humanizing take on an otherwise mythological, unapproachable, and sometimes deemed boring character because of his vast capability.
Hmm.
And I think Grant Morrison does a beautiful job, Michael, of propelling that mythology, solidifying it as a concept, but also making Superman unbelievably relatable and human in the process.
Go on.
Um,
Are we going to get into talking about it, Ben, do you think?
yeah, let's do that. So this came about, Michael, for a number of different ways. Frank Quitely and Grant Morrison had been long-time collaborators at this point, Michael.
The Authority.
They'd worked on plenty of The
No,
Authority.
I don't think they
We Three.
did The Authority, did they? No, they didn't.
No, that was Mark Miller.
No,
Sorry,
Mark
that was
Miller.
Mark Miller. We Three was their big kind of critical success at that time, Michael. It's the bizarre reimagining of the Homeward Bound narrative with the pets going home.
Oh, yeah.
But if the pets were cybernetically enhanced military weapons using animal nervous systems as their software.
Very exciting. They'd done X-Men as well, hadn't they? They'd done E for Extinction.
They'd done X-Men. Well, I don't know if it was E for Extinction yet. Was that 2002 maybe?
Yeah,
or maybe it was.
That was before this.
Had they done that?
Yeah.
So that's where they'd kind of solidified that, and they had a great way of working together, and they have a huge mutual respect for each other. But in true Grant Morrison fashion, I suppose, ladies and gentlemen, Grant Morrison is fantastic, and for all the slagging we do of him on this and our other podcast, Sure Look, Sure Listen, he is a great comic book writer. He writes interesting comics that are at minimum interesting to read. You'll never pick up a dull Grant Morrison run. It's not going to happen.
You'll pick up a dull Grant Morrison issue sometimes, but it's usually in service of something.
Yeah. He loves a build-up. Grant loves a build-up. But he also, ladies and gentlemen, loves a bit of myth-making around his own process. So, as the story goes for this one, Michael, this was adapted into a DC straight-to-animated DVD.
Yeah.
Back in 2011, I believe.
Yeah. Kind of all right.
And it was grand. It was fine. It's grand. I wouldn't bother. But in conjunction with it, Michael, Warner Brothers released a featurette called Now.
Yes, go on.
And it was about how the comic book came about. And they interview Grant Morrison and Dan Didio. And it's a 30-minute documentary. It's free on YouTube. It's linked below in the description, ladies and gentlemen. You can take a look at it. And Grant Morrison details basically his thought process behind the whole thing. And one of my favorite bits about this, Michael, is he claims that he was out at a comic book event when this was bubbling around in the background of his brain, and he'd been talking to his publisher at the time, and they went out on the town after some comic book event, Michael.
It was San Diego Comic
And
Con, Benjamin. He also tells this story in the collector's edition of the comic.
he does. It's in the background of it. But apparently, Michael, they came across a fella in a Superman costume, walking up and down some train lines. Did you hear this?
Yeah. But tell us anyway.
Yeah. So he grabs this fella, and him and his publisher at the time go, Jesus, this is fucking mental. We've just been talking about relaunching Superman. And he says, you know, it was like a shamanic visitation.
Oh,
If we had been Indians, this would be the white buffalo laden with significance. And I might cut him in there, like, Michael. I don't know. I haven't decided how I'm going to do this yet, but I might cut that little clip
leave
in.
him there. That was pretty accurate.
But so he comes up with this, and he claims, Michael, that they asked this gentleman in the costume to sit down. And he said he was the most relaxed, laid-back man he'd ever spoken to. And for him, that was a huge jigsaw piece in place. And he realized that when we approach this character as kind of a man weighed down by his own responsibility, or a man carrying the world on his shoulders, that's not really an accurate way to look at someone who is invulnerable to everything and sort of knows it. If you were that character, Michael,
Yes.
if you were essentially a god,
Yeah.
you would be very relaxed.
Yeah.
Because there's not a lot that can fuck with you.
Yeah. No, I know,
And-
Ben. I know.
I'm sure you know that feeling yourself, Michael, whenever you get public transport or walk amongst us mere ants.
Yeah.
It's like, oh Jesus, all these poor little insects
Yeah.
must be very frantic. And so that was a big piece of the puzzle for him, and he took that a step further, Michael, with the conceit of this, which is Superman is dying.
Spoilers,
But-
Jesus.
Yeah, I know. Spoilers for issue 1 that came out in 2006.
5.
But 2005. And he created this, Michael, and he took it a step further, because not only is Superman dying, but his powers are exploding exponentially as a result of that. He has become... did I get it wrong again?
I
Go
don't
on.
know.
What did I use wrong this
I
time?
just we've talked about this before in our other podcast, but
I could be wrong. His powers expand beyond anything that he's had to deal with in this timeline before. He gets
good.
a brand new wave. His intellect becomes the nth level intellect they talk about in DC sometimes. He surpasses any benchmark that he'd had before. It's depicted beautifully in the first scene where the good billionaire of this world, the anti Elon Musk, if you want, Quintum,
Quintum, yeah, Leo
name?
Quintum, Dr. Quintum.
Leo Quintum. He's like, well, Superman, you're pushing. I don't know how to tell you this, but you're you're surpassing anything we've ever measured before for you. And yeah, he's beyond Superman at this point. He's something else. And so that gives Grant Morrison the scope to tell this laid back kind of story. But give it real stakes as well, because at the heart of it, Michael, Superman has cancer. That's what's happened.
The long and short of it. And like everyone else who has cancer, he becomes temporarily more superpowered.
Ladies and gentlemen, for medical reasons, don't fucking take that on board.
No.
But come here to me. It's pretty spectacular. Like the cover that we see on a lot of these is Superman resting on a cloud,
Just chilling
overlooking
out, Ben.
a city. And Grant Morrison goes into great detail explaining what that is. He said that was really important for us because we wanted to invite the reader to see the world from Superman's perspective. Not see a story in the world of Superman, but see what that world is like for Superman. And in many ways, All-Star Superman is that. It's an invitation to see the world from his perspective. And that's kind of one of the huge themes of this.
Yes, it
is Superman trying to help humanity understand the universe, not just the world, but the universe from his perspective. And it plays a pivotal role in several different moments.
Yeah,
But it's pretty huge.
Even in the denouement.
Yeah, it's huge. So I suppose, like, looking at those initial 3 issues, it establishes everything I just spoke about, Michael. We have, we have the critical event of Superman saving Leo Quintum's explorer team.
Very Fantastic
As
Four-esque explorer team.
yeah, Leo Quintum is Reed Richards without Elasto Boy powers, kind of. There's a touch of that to him.
Upon reading this for the first time, I was reading it going, is this a little Fantastic Four take? Because they're on a mission, they're getting bombarded with rays, someone mutates into a big monster, there's a smart guy and his wife and another person. And I thought we were getting a Superman in the Marvel Universe take here, only for a couple of pages. And obviously it goes away from that very quickly. But it felt like a tiny little bit of a Fantastic Four homage.
Yeah, there's definitely a touch of it, Michael. And I think Jamie Grant's colors and Frank Quitely's art lends to that kind of golden age sci-fi fantasticism, if you want.
Yeah.
I think that's a huge part of it. But it also establishes, Michael, in a spectacular way with that fantastic splash page there of Superman flying around the curve of the sun. And good God, that's as quintessential a bloody Superman pose or image as you could hope to get. The amount of iconic moments that this run establishes, Michael, for Superman as a character is insane.
Benjo, look how his spit curl is a little S.
Look at it, Michael. There's S's everywhere. Can't fucking shake a stick for S's.
I'm not usually a huge fan of Frank Quitely's art. I think because he, again, this is more reflective on me as some sort of deviant, but he came about and became popular when I was a horny teen, and his art isn't attractive. It's great. No. It's incredible. But like he rose to popularity when you had the likes of Brian Hitch and Greg Land and what was the guy's name who gave all the characters huge jugs? Joe Madureira and did Joe Madureira do Battle Chasers? Yeah, it was him, wasn't it?
I think it's him, yeah.
Like,
I think it's him.
Even Jim Lee, like all of Jim Lee's female characters are sexy and his male characters are ripped to bits. But Frank Quitely's characters...
no pouches on Jim Lee characters. It's all skin tight.
Yeah,
There's not a single pouch to be found.
Jim Lee can't draw clothes.
No.
But Frank
doesn't like them.
He doesn't. He's no interest. But Frank Quitely will draw skinny characters in baggy clothes, and he'll draw kind of. Yeah. He draws a big, strong, powerful-looking Superman, but he's not six-pack showing through the suit Superman.
Not at all.
Yeah,
not at all. He's just a kind of Herculean figure. Like it's a real old school Charles Atlas bodybuilder style Superman.
Yeah.
Where it's not shredded. He's not on the 1,500 calorie a day diet.
Yeah,
to
exactly.
Get himself
and all the female characters have distinct faces and don't just look like tracings of porn stars. And that was some mad.
I've missed that. I've missed the heavy mascara lip filler.
Yeah, it was mad shit in the early 2000s.
But I think probably one of the things, Michael, and I think both the lads are showing off how good they are at subtly layering things beautifully in comic books throughout this. There are several moments in this, Michael, that blow my mind, especially in the first 3 issues, for establishing the kind of man both that Superman is and what he's capable of. I spoke about this a little bit on our socials, Michael, which you'll find linked below in the description there, ladies and gentlemen. But one of my favorite panels is from issue 1, and it's where Frank Quitely shows off his ability to draw as he does Clark Kent coming into the Daily Planet, simultaneously saving a child and his dog from being run over by a bus, knocking over someone's coffee, catching it again, placing it down on the thing, and still being relatively on time for work, all in the space of a couple of seconds. But Frank Quitely does it in that beautiful kind of flowing sense of multiple comic book characters, and we understand it to be one moment and one character moving through time. It's stunning, Michael.
What a show off.
Stunning stuff.
What an absolute show off.
He's such a show off.
Benjamin,
he's such a show off.
The first 3 issues are my favorite.
Do you know what, Michael?
Go on.
Mine too.
Yeah, yeah. Uh,
Mine too.
I think my favorite single issue is issue 3, where Lois gets the magic powder and becomes Superwoman for the day. Because it's a great story
Mm.
about Superman sharing his worldview. And that's exactly what, that is exactly one of the recurring themes of this is someone gets to experience the world from Superman's perspective. And in this case, it's Lois. And she's so well adjusted and smart and normal that it doesn't drive her mad. And
Yeah.
she just she has fun with it for a day. Like anyone else that just drives
Yeah.
them mad, and then like they'd go
Yeah.
crazy or they'd want to recreate it, but she never even mentions it again. Like, can I do that again? She just goes back to Lois laning about the place without a moment's hesitation. But I also relate to Samson and Atlas more than any characters in the history of Superman. What a pair of arseholes. If they were
What
around
a
now,
pair of
then they
dicks.
would have a podcast. They would have a superheroing
Oh,
podcast.
absolutely. 100%. It'd be called Hair and Shoulders.
Yeah.
Something like
Okay, that
that.
sounds good.
But
That's quite good.
yeah, but look, like what a pair of dicks. What a pair of twats. But also, those first 3 issues, Michael, are Grant Morrison's love letter to Silver Age comics. We have Leo Quintum is introduced. We have Superman's Fortress of Solitude. We get a very cool splash page, Michael, breaking down the Fortress of Solitude. There's a few nods to old DC comics, including a chessboard with life-size versions of DC heroes, including the only appearance of
The
Batman we
only
get in the
appearance of
entire run.
Batman. He gets mentioned a couple of times, but conspicuous by his absence in this run.
Yes, Superman doesn't make peace with Batman. I guess he just dies.
Yeah.
I guess that's just how it goes. But one of my favorite bits, Michael, is the fantastical elements of it. For example, Superman meets a baby sun eater, and rather than kill it or remove it, he takes it in and feeds it like a stray dog.
Yeah, I know. And then there's the tragedy later, which I'm very upset about.
Look, leave those fucking baby sun eaters alone.
Leave them alone.
Fuck's sake, Grant. Fuck's sake. I also loved, Michael, the bizarre fucking Sphinx, the quantum being. And again, he has an interaction with that where he has to meet, where he has to solve its riddle, which is what happens when the immovable object meets the unstoppable force, or vice versa. I can't remember the exact way it's phrased. And he goes, they surrender. And again, a crucial moment for understanding one of the major themes of this run is Superman has to surrender. He is the man who can do everything. He is the unstoppable force of DC Comics. And yet he's about to meet the immovable object, which in this case happens to be his own death.
Ugh.
And it's pretty fascinating. We move from there, Michael, I suppose, into probably my least favorite issue of the run.
Oh.
The Olsen War, the Jimmy Olsen War.
Okay, go on.
Great in some senses, in terms of, I think the cover is fabulous. It doesn't do it justice in the collected issues in the graphic novel. In the original run, Michael, all the covers are exactly like Silver Age covers, in which they have big bombastic statements written on them that would kind of draw the reader in. They are exactly what old comics used to be, in that the classic single issue runs are meant to draw you in with things like the Olsen Superman War, with a giant exclamation mark, and Jimmy Olsen, making some kind of quip on the cover as he runs away from Superman lifting a car.
Isn't this issue simultaneously an interesting take on Doomsday, but also a blink and you'll miss it? Oh, is that what they're doing with Doomsday?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
I guess that's fine. Yeah, let's move on, I guess.
There's a few very interesting moments of that, Michael, and because, again, Grant Morrison has gone out of his way to put this in its own timeline.
Yes.
We would assume that Superman has died like he did in the main DC continuity, but that doesn't seem to be the case.
No.
Doomsday is a weapon that has never been unleashed.
Yeah, and looks like it has a completely different backstory and everything. This was a confusing issue, as someone who knows a lot about Superman comics and has read a lot of them. Going, what is Doomsday not? What's what's Doomsday doing here? He's not a Kryptonian science experiment man anymore. It's just a weapon you can use to super soldiers or something. I don't know. It's very throwaway. It feels like a throwaway issue.
I mean, it's important in establishing, I suppose, in some ways, Superman is microdosing death. In other ways, it's establishing important relationships and giving them their time to shine. Because Jimmy Olsen is very often the butt of the joke
Not in this though. In this, he's
in
quite
Superman
competent and
comics.
capable.
Exactly. And that's, again, something Grant Morrison really set out to nail down, was the fact that Jimmy Olsen should be competent. There's a reason that Superman trusts Jimmy Olsen to have a signal watch. There's a reason that Superman looks to Jimmy Olsen for help and advice sometimes, and he establishes that beautifully, I think. But I do think it's a bizarre turn, for the run. It doesn't fit as well, and it doesn't gel as well as I would like it to. I thought that the evil Superman, or the Kryptonian influenced evil Superman, would show us more of Superman's insecurity, but it doesn't really do that.
No, and
Um,
as well, he kind of turns a bit Bizarro. Like he starts
yeah,
talking like Bizarro and acting
yeah,
like Bizarro, and then the Bizarros show up a few issues later, and
mm,
it's like, oh, maybe I'm mentally deficient here a little bit. Maybe I'm missing a connection or something. And I have only read this through twice. I understand there is a connection in a sense where the black kryptonite
yeah,
comes from the underverse, and so does the Bizarro monster planet. So maybe it was foreshadowing a little bit, but it does feel like a
yeah.
cohesive bit of the story, this. And it feels like it threads the same idea twice.
Yeah, I mean, I got very confused because originally I understood that the Bizarros were essentially Agatha and the other employees at Quantum Laboratories, um, but that also isn't the case, and it becomes something else, and it changes again, and it's very strange. But we move on from there, Michael, to one of my favorite issues for this run, which is the Gospel according to Lex Luthor.
Yes, this is a great
Um,
issue. For one thing, put all the Lex Luthor stuff aside before you go on. This is the best issue of bumbling Clark Kent Supermaning. It's great.
Spectacular,
It's fabulous. Like
spectacular.
this is this is the issue most reminiscent of the best of the adventures of Lois and Clark, the new
Yeah.
Superman with Dean Cain. This
Oh, fuck him.
Oh yeah, no use as not a great series. And again,
Fucking Dean
my
Cain.
personal relationship with Superman largely formed by that series, so no wonder I wasn't a
Yeah,
huge
yeah, that's
fan.
fair.
But it's great for Clark managing to stay in character as Clark while still getting info out of Lex, and while still maintaining the facade of bumbling but also saving the day, and letting Lex think he's saving the day.
Yeah, I mean, Lex Luthor is he is in many ways the perfect foil for Superman. He is a human, selfish, e- egotistical creature,
He's ripped. He's
that
bald.
wants, yeah, but he wants to be Superman. He desperately wants to be Superman, and I think Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely do the greatest job of portraying a man who is so fucking high on his own supply that he doesn't notice just how snivelly and needy and projection-y he is. Like, he projects non-stop, and I think this is fabulous, Michael, because we've spoken a little bit on our other podcast, Michael. Should listen about how Grant Morrison gave us the Bat God from his Justice League run.
Yes, go on.
Um, and the Bat God is the Batman who can beat anyone with prep time.
Yeah.
As opposed to the red paste he would be if he went up with Superman without a moment's notice. You know what I mean? He'd just be a red smear. But other interpretations of Lex Luthor could be guilty of that. Justice League being a prime example. The Lex Luthor, voiced by
The Flash.
I can't. No, Clancy. It's the huge voice actor who's Mr. Krabs and other huge
Clancy
characters.
Wiggum
Anyway,
from The
he's
Simpsons.
no, it's not Clancy Williams from The Simpsons, but
The
he is
Kurgan from
Lex Luthor
Highlander.
is yes, the Kurgan from Highlander. Luthor is Luthor God in Justice League and Justice League Unlimited from Bruce Timm
It's Clancy
and the
Brown.
gang over there. It's Clancy Brown, thank you. And he is a god in that, and he is the smartest man in the room at all times. My favorite thing about this, and Grant Morrison has been very candid about it, is yes, he's very smart, but Jesus Christ, does he think he's smarter than he is a lot of the time?
What a
And
dick.
this is a great what a dick. And this is a great depiction of that because he thinks he understands the prison and the kind of social ecosystem of that prison. And everybody's trying to kill him. They all fucking hate him. They all think he's a smug up his own hole twat.
Yeah.
And you know, they are trying to get him. And only for Superman intervening at every possible opportunity are they not getting that. And I think that's really important. But it also shows Superman lose his temper, which I really enjoy. It's possibly the only moment where Superman loses his cool because Superman goes into this as Clark Kent, hoping that he can understand Lex and see if he can set Lex up as his successor, or as someone who will steward humanity in his absence. And he loses his temper at one point, Michael. He has that excellent confrontation in Lex's room where he snarls at him and he says, Jesus, Lex, you could have been friends with Superman. What is it? He says, you'll die like a mad dog in the yard. Think straight, Lex. He loses his temper. It's that fantastic panel there on the lower side.
The only time he scowls or grimaces in the whole thing.
It's the only angry expression we get out of the lot of them. And Lex doesn't care. My other favorite thing about the characterization of Lex here, Michael, is that he draws on his eyebrows.
Yeah, great stuff. Of course he does.
Well, you see, this is the thing. So, again, Grant Morrison talks a little bit about this when he's discussing how he came up with all these ideas and these concepts. In that we've had so many iterations of Lex Luthor. Sometimes he grew up in Smallville. We saw that in the show Smallville sometimes. Sometimes he's a mad scientist. And then when John Byrne took over the comics in the late 70s, early 80s, he became the billionaire mogul character that we see more commonly today. That's a John Byrne thing. He was a mad inventor, but then he became a tycoon in John Byrne's iteration of the character. But it's often said that he lost his hair, but they always give him eyebrows. Whereas in this, he's like, no, he lost all his hair due to a chemical accident.
Yeah.
He's completely bald.
And he
The
draws
man
his
is as
eyebrows
naked
on.
as- and he draws his eyebrows on. And sometimes he does it in a maniacal arch. But one of my favorite things is...
Yes.
Go on,
He
sorry.
draws
No, go on.
Superman's eyebrows on. He gives himself the same eyebrows.
Exactly. He is so obsessed with being Superman that he draws the same eyebrows that Superman has on his own face. And I think, that could have been a throwaway detail to show him as an idiot. But Grant Morrison takes that little step further and makes it a symptom of his need to be Superman. And I think it's fabulous. I thought this was one of the best things. I thought the disgusting version of Parasite was phenomenal.
Yeah, great stuff. It also introduces my personal favorite character in the whole thing. And the only character I think that goes absolutely nowhere. His unnecessarily sexy niece, Nasty.
Nasty.
Great
Nasty
stuff.
Luthor.
She goes nowhere. What is the point of
She
her?
goes nowhere. I don't know. Grant Morrison could occasionally be accused of including teenage sex pots for no reason in some of his narratives. It's in
This
the
is my niece.
Invisibles.
She's a teenage
Like,
sex
it's there
pot.
in the Invisibles.
Don't worry about it.
And
She won't be relevant
it's
later.
not explained at all. But it is, again, Michael, a nod to Silver Age comics. Because the Silver Age comics introduce new characters. Oh, this is Superman's niece. This is Superman's cousin. Some of them stuck. Superman's cousin sticks and we get Supergirl.
Not in
But
this, we don't.
sometimes you'd have, this is Lex Luthor's son, niece, nephew, blah, blah, blah. And it'd just be randomly thrown in there and you'd be like, what the fuck? And occasionally, occasionally you have to remember that Grant Morrison is writing his usual love letter to Silver Age comics.
Yeah,
That's
the
a
funny
Grant
thing is though,
Morrison
Ben, right?
thing
Because
to
I have the extended collector's edition of this, and every character gets a little bit of backstory and development and explanation in the back of the book. Like he explains the design principles behind Samson and Atlas and Leo Quintum and
And the
even
lizard men.
throwaway characters like the underground dinosaur men. And Nasty doesn't even get a description. It's like by the time they got to writing the director's cut, they forgot they'd included her. And she just kind of disappears as well. She doesn't get
Yeah.
captured, or she has a kind of, she leads some sort of tank attack on Metropolis, and really weird, really disjointed bit of storytelling where they introduce this bizarre teenage sex pot character and then just go,
But
regret that.
it's so interesting that she is the most Gen Z of characters
She,
at a time when it wasn't a thing.
well, she's the most
It
2005 character in this by far. Like every comic book character around that time was like her. Anyway, she's
yeah.
gotten more screen time now than she's ever had before. Benjamin,
Yeah.
let's move on to the third kind of arc, which personally was my least favorite.
Okay, well, where do you kick off arc 3, Michael?
Arc 3 for me is the two Bizarro Planet episodes and the
Yeah.
Scottish Supermen.
Yeah. So Bizarro is brought into this. The underworld, as it were, is a foreshadowed thing that we encounter, and essentially Superman takes on a bit of an Odysseus on his voyage 20 years away
Yeah,
kind of thing.
yeah, the classic
Um,
time dilation sort of story.
Yeah, it's a very Odyssean arc, if you want to look at it that way. And Michael owes me €10 now because he bet me I couldn't get the phrase Odyssean into this podcast before we started. But I got it in.
Yeah. I can't think of a good joke for that, so you're going to just have to get away with it.
It's all right. It's all right. I'll just get away
You're
with
just
it.
going to
for
have to
today.
get away
You'll
with
get
it.
me on the
you
next one, Michael.
Son of a bitch.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoyed that kind of shoehorn, superfluous, up its own hole, academic inference, why don't you give us a review wherever you've been listening? If you've made it this far, you must like us.
Yeah, we're an hour in.
We're an hour in now, Michael.
Yeah, you're an hour.
Yeah, we've only got.
Or you're listening to it in bed. But just let it play.
Or you listen to it.
Just let it play. That's fine.
And then give us a review in the morning.
Yeah.
It could be a 5-star review saying it put me to sleep. That's fine.
That's fine.
I'm okay with that.
That's fine.
Anyway, yeah. So initially, they're quite horrific, Michael. This is a little tribute. The initial introduction of the Bizarro men, or the Bizarros, or whatever you want to call them,
Yeah.
is kind of horrific. It's a bit of a Night of the Living Dead vibe.
Yeah, a bit of a Night of the Living Dead, bit of body horror. Like they kill off a character, they throw her out the window, and I thought she might come back later,
Yeah.
or some of the people who got
she just dies.
Yeah, she just dies. And I thought some of the people who might got morphed into Bizarros might come back, but they don't. No, they're just dead. And
They're just dead.
the only way to protect yourself from it is to be pumped full of Viagra, apparently, which is the most
Viagra, apparently.
the most 2006 joke you could possibly get into a comic.
Steve Lombard is a very 2006 depiction of an alpha male, though.
Yeah.
Now it would be a podcaster bodybuilder like Joe Rogan.
Yeah, well, he pretty much is that.
Steve
isn't he?
Lombard is, yeah. Steve Lombard is 2006's Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
You know, like it's that's what he is. But yeah, the Bizarros are awful. They melt people down and turn them into Bizarros.
Yeah.
So in that sense, it's very Night of the Living Dead. Then there is the Bizarro Superman, who Superman has to take on. He only saves a kid by the skin of his teeth. The kid's about to die because he mistakes Bizarro for Superman.
Yeah.
And he runs to him. And then he says, "Me, I'm no Bizarro. Me, am be you, friend." And again, it's opposites whenever you're dealing with Bizarro.
Oh,
That got so confusing for me.
I have no
Michael.
time for it.
I
fucking hate
my
this
head
shit.
melted.
I hate this shit. It's just, it doesn't make any sense. There's too much thinking here. I don't mind when I'm reading a comic thinking about themes or thinking about what's a character, what are a character's motivations? You know, how is this reflecting in the author's worldview being reflected on this page? But what I hate is having to try and translate what the fuck is anyone saying. And this is 2 issues of just suffering. And I just hate it. I hate Bizarro anyway. I've no time for spooky grey-faced nonsense. And the planet of Bizarros with this bizarre Odyssean nightmare of Bizarro Superman, what's the other guy's name? Bizarro?
Zibaro.
What?
Zibaro.
Zibaro, and then Bizarro
Yeah.
Jor-El shows up, and like a lot of Superman's plot in getting off the planet is realizing he has to speak backwards, which is, he's a super intellect. How did he not figure that out instantly? Why did he
Yeah.
only figure that out in a point of crisis? Oh, I hate this whole issue. I get it, but it feels like watching an episode of Ulysses 31 when I was a kid and going, oh, get your mythologizing out of my science fiction, you son of a bitch. Which is funny because I didn't mind Samson and Atlas. I loved them.
Welcome back to the Steve Lombard, Atlas, and Samson podcast.
Three best characters and Nasty. They're my four
Three best
favorite characters.
Nasty, yeah. Yeah. But I mean, look, it's interesting. It doesn't fit as well, I think, as some of the other stuff, especially Zibaro. I hated Zibaro, mainly because he reminded me of me,
Yeah,
the mopey,
yeah.
poetic
Yeah,
bastard.
he was you on a planet. Go, will you read my poems? I fucking will not read your poems.
But I think it's supposed to be, again, a reiteration of just how different Superman is from humans, because Zibaro is a gem in 10 million and is intelligent and is capable, but so is Superman. Superman is beyond anyone on humanity. But I just don't think it lands as well as it does. Now, again, as beautiful love letters go and as poignant end goes, Zibaro has to make the ultimate sacrifice and give up his only option of getting off the underworld or the Bizarro world.
Yeah, I thought he wasn't going to. I was like, this prick. Oh, I'm sick of him already. He
And
better
that's
not
a
be in
bit
another
sad.
issue.
Yeah. And he wasn't. They do away with him then. And then we meet, I guess, there but by the grace of God goes Superman, because we could have gotten Scottish pricks.
Superman could have been a couple of Scottish pricks. Benjamin, I've seen this before.
Yeah.
This was called Superman 2, the movie.
Yes. Yeah.
I've seen it before, but they
Um,
weren't Scottish. They forgot to be Scottish.
I think in a lot of cases, maybe Grant Morrison wanted to bring in someone like Zod and have him kind of interact with Superman. But again, he's trying to, I suppose, sidestep the weight of continuity for this run.
Right.
And so instead he creates Lilo and what's his name?
Stitch.
Yeah, Lilo and Stitch, the Kryptonians.
Yeah.
And Superman returns after 20 long years and he finds out that Penelope has been laid upon by suitors. In this case, the suitors are Kryptonians in silly fucking costumes. And this one has a great name. It's Cursed with the Replacement Superman, which again is Silver Age in the extreme. Superman lands in a field in a circus. I remember that now. But the Kryptonians have wasted no time in Superman's absence, and they have put Kryptonian tech all over the world, because the Daily Planet has Kryptonian tech attached to it now. Earth's New Champions is the headlines. They're terraforming the planet in different ways. It's crazy.
No,
Do you know
it's
what I
not,
mean?
though. It's not. This is the thing. I don't like this issue either. I like the idea of Superman's away and Superman's the son of a nerd,
Yeah.
and two non-nerds show up and say, we're going to sort this shit out. But it's Superman 2 writ large with Scottish people. But also, it's,
Yeah.
I think, the worst indulgence of the Silver Age in a sense, where it's just dealt with so offhandedly. Like, they go into space and they get sick and they come back and they go, oh, we're sick. And he goes, I'll save you. Phantom Zone, off you pop. And okay, it's a self-contained story, and it's an interesting self-contained story in a sense of a world without Superman and a replacement Superman, and what if he wasn't raised by a kindly couple, which throws back to the literal opening page of the entire the entire thing. But the how quickly and offhandedly and like meta way they're dealt with. Oh, you flew through the bad cloud, which we've never talked about or mentioned before, and I'm not affected by, so I guess you're fucked. Off you go to the Phantom Zone. Thanks for bringing Kandar up, though, because now we'll do that, and that will be more interesting in the next couple of issues.
Yeah. So, I mean, it is a setup issue again. I think it probably shares a bit of ground with the Jimmy Olsen issue in that it is... This comic, in general, is a love letter to the Silver Age. this run is a love letter to the Silver Age, but every once in a while, one or two issues become a parody of the Silver Age, and that's exactly what happens in the Jimmy Olsen Superman War, and it's exactly what happens in this. We do get a fabulous and most Frank Quietly panel at the end, though, of Lilo and Stitch go to the Phantom Zone and are about to kick the crap out of some ugly buglies
Yeah.
down the bottom here. That's the most Frank Quietly fucking thing I've ever seen.
Frank Quietly, Ben. You have to say Frank Quietly, or it loses the pun.
Frank Quietly.
It's not Frank Quietly.
That's the most Frank Quietly thing.
No.
Yes, all right. Go on, tell your little pun joke.
It's
Go
not a
on.
pun.
It is a pun.
What?
It is a pun.
Well, it is a pun, yeah, but this is not the man's real name. The man's real name is Vincent.
Oh, Vincent.
Vincent Dyan, I
Starry,
think, or
starry
Vincent
night.
Dynan. And it's
probably something very Scottish.
Yeah, exactly. Vinny D, he calls himself. But it's it's quite frankly backwards.
Yeah.
Frank Quietly.
Yeah.
So that
he's done it.
That doesn't work if you say quietly.
No, but I'm going to keep saying it just to annoy you.
Yeah, okay.
Now, come here to me.
Yeah.
Come here to me. That moves us into the final arc
Yeah.
of this, Michael, which is essentially Superman putting his house in order by any other name.
Yes, exactly. He leaves his last will and testament and then goes and sorts shit out.
Yeah. And it's a pretty sad kind of run. I think that second to last, third final issue, where he's writing his will, is pretty great myth making. I think. It's episode 10. It's called Never Ending, and as the title would suggest, Michael, it's kind of a summation of all the good that Superman has done. He visits children in a terminally ill cancer ward. He
Fixes them,
begins
though.
to write his will in Kryptonian.
Benjamin.
Yes.
Isn't there a great stark image here of Superman on his throne, essentially? It's a heavy rests the crown moment. And
it's very Shakespearean.
It's very Shakespearean, but it's also very Frank Frazettian. It's almost a Conan the Barbarian on his throne moment, where he's in the Fortress of Solitude, he's leaning on an elbow, he's got a foot up, and he's leaving his last will and testament. It's a very not mythological, but it's a very striking image, and it's one of the panels, or I suppose that's a single splash page, is it? I don't have the comic in front of me.
No, it's one. It's a single large page.
Yeah, I really like that as a kind of that's the defining image of the end of this story to me.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's the defining image for a lot of this comic. Do you know what I mean? It is the last will and testament of Superman. And for the rest of that issue, we get some pretty interesting stuff. I think in this run, we get what is considered to be the most iconic image of this run that we see every time. Whenever someone on Reddit is asked, why do you love Superman? They will inevitably post this image or this page. And it's the page where Superman intervenes in a suicide attempt.
Oh, yeah, with Regan.
And he saves the young girl. And he does so with compassion as opposed to any major superpower. He turns around and he says, your doctor really did get held up, Regan. It's never as bad as it seems. And again, this issue is the final cementing of Superman's greatest power, which is his compassion, empathy, and humanity.
I mean,
learned though it may be.
That scene is almost word for word undermined in The Boys by Homelander.
Yes.
And it's kind of almost a defining this guy isn't Superman moment.
Yeah.
So that's how key to Superman this is that you can subvert it to show your character's not Superman.
Yeah, it's bizarre. It also introduces us to the very fun Grant Morrison concept that we are a backup universe running in Superman's universe, which is known as Earth Q in this, and it's where Siegel and Schuster come up with the idea for Superman. It's right at the end of the panel. We see a very rough sketch
stuff all together
of
stuff all together, Benjamin. The universe that we live in is a universe that Superman created to memorialize himself.
Yeah.
The smug prick.
The smug prick, the Lex Luthor-esque prick.
Yeah.
But what I like about this, Michael, is Grant Morrison talks a little bit again about how big Superman is as a character and how his legacy has impacted comic books to this day, Michael. Like, he's an unavoidable character. He has outlived Siegel and Schuster by as many lifetimes. He has outlived many of his greatest creators. And Grant Morrison says himself that he will outlive Grant Morrison. There is something never ending in Superman as a character. There is something that draws new generations to him. We might see that with Superman Legacy coming out, Michael, with David Corenswet. We don't
Sweaty
know
Dave.
how that's going to happen. Sweaty Dave, as we call him down the pub.
Mm-hmm.
But then, Michael, it brings us into the end game of this, which is, Jesus Christ, Lex, could you not be a prick for 5 minutes?
Stop being such a prick, Lex
Fucking hell.
Luthor. The final issue should have been called.
Jesus, he's such a prick. So we finally get the execution of Lex that we were promised, and of course he has created his own super serum and taken it with a cocktail drink. There's some actual excellent foreshadowing throughout the comic, Michael, on that. Sometimes Clark visits him and he's reading how to make the perfect cocktail, and he always says it's something new to learn. That's his motto is, there's always more to learn, there's always something new to learn. And he hides behind that kind of knowledge for knowledge's sake smokescreen, and he creates, tunneling audiobook robots and super serums, and that's what he's done. And he takes on Superman's powers. He becomes the anti-Superman, not a Bizarro, but an actual morally opposed Superman. He becomes the Ubermensch, the thing to fear that I guess Siegel and Schuster played with
Not for
all
long, though.
those years ago. Not for long though, because he's a fucking prick. But yeah, there's a few of my favorite moments here. Again, I think spectacular paneling takes place here. Lex Luthor actually finally understands Superman in these final issues, issue 12 in particular. He has that moment where he says, this is how he sees all the time, every day. Like it's all just us in here together. And we're all we've got. Superman sees the world on a cosmic scale of finiteness, I suppose, as opposed to infinite possibility. And he kind of, one of the things I really like about this is it defines that Superman is not, he's very morally relative in that he understands the universe is coming to an end. Entropy, the immovable object, if you want, is vast approaching. And he's the only person that keeps that in perspective all the time and is like, well, we kind of have to make a good crack at this, gang, because it's all going to end one day.
It's all we got.
It's all we got. It's all we got. We get some fabulous stuff here, though, Michael. Lex Luthor in his fucking green and purple. Love it.
Iconic.
Iconic stuff. Smacking the shit out of the little people. Godly power takes it out on the Daily Planet, who he feels wrote bad things about him once.
Yeah.
He is at his most Elon Musk, Michael, here. in the final 2 issues. He is a petty little man who would buy out a social media company because they occasionally criticized him once upon a time. It's really great stuff. And, Grant Morrison gets to do some of his own stuff. Superman goes on a vision quest, essentially, in his own brain with his dad. And it turns out all Kryptonians have a strange coma state they go into before they die.
Yeah.
That's how you get to Kryptonian heaven.
Yeah. And they can just go, do you want to die or do you want to be light or whatever? And he's like, yeah, I'll be light and go to the sun or whatever. Just keep everything ticking over.
And then, Superman uses his gravity gun, speeds up time, makes Lex's metabolism work overtime, and he burns out the superpowers before
Very
he has
clever.
a chance. And then we get an amazing panel where Lex, after all his bodybuilding, takes on a perfectly human Superman, because Superman has essentially lost his powers, have been depowered severely by this stage. And Superman just knocks him out, just fucking takes him out. Look, Michael, this is fucking great. He has his final kiss, and then he makes his big mythological sacrifice by plunging into the sun. It is Mexican fucking mythology. It is Aztec mythology. It is Odin-esque sacrifice. It's everything you could want, Michael, in a comic there towards the end. And it turns out that Superman takes up residence in the sun and keeps it going.
Good lad.
Good lad. Very full circle. brought about by the sun, ended by the sun, becomes the sun. Great stuff.
But we'll probably be back.
Great stuff. But we'll probably be back. Now, he never was. They never. Well, I mean, he might. Still might come out. Be great if tomorrow, Michael, they announce that they're making All-Star Superman Volume 2.
I
That'd
don't
be
need
fucking
it.
Fabulous
I don't need
for
it or
us
want it, Ben. I
from-
don't need it or want it.
From a marketing point of view. I want it from a marketing point of view.
For this
Michael. I
podcast, yes,
want it.
great.
That's what I want.
But leave the story
Great.
alone. Don't Joker foliage you this. We don't need a sequel to
Oh.
this.
Don't bring other pop culture into this. That's for our other podcast. Sure, look, sure, listen.
The
Stop.
podcast, the politics of pop culture, link in the description below.
Just see us. Ladies and gentlemen, that was our take on All-Star Superman. We still want to hear yours. We want to know what you think, ladies and gentlemen. Go down to the description, join our Discord, or leave us comments on the different social media channels that we're on. We want to hear. But especially, ladies and gentlemen, we have some very specific things we want to hear from you fine folks out there. I should say, ladies and gentlemen, and those beyond the binary, Michael. Sorry, I've been very binary focused today. I
You
apologize.
could say ladies
gentlemen.
and or
Thanks.
gentlemen.
Ladies
No, that
and or
doesn't work.
gentlemen.
No, that doesn't
Folks.
work.
Folks works. We'll just go with folks.
Humans.
Humans. Lend me your ears. We do want to know what you think our November comic should be. We've already picked our October. We've already picked our September. But we do want to know what you think we should read for collecting issues. Your monthly comic book club in November. So if you're reading something at the moment, if you've read something recently, preferably something with a bit of heft to it.
Bit of heft
It's
to
a
it.
month-long book.
12
club,
issues, kind
Bit of
of
heft to
nice
it.
amount.
12 issues. That'll be tidy. Do let us know wherever you listen. You can drop a comment on Spotify. We're right here on Spotify. You can drop a comment. You can drop a comment on the YouTube channel. Yeah. You can comment on Spotify episodes now.
The world is just everything's coming
2024,
together,
Michael.
isn't it?
Yeah, 2024. Future. But come here to me. You can leave us a comment on the YouTube channel. You can leave us a comment on the various socials that we listen on. Or you can join the Discord and talk to us directly in our recommendations channel. We have it set up on the Discord. Go and take a look. Yeah, let us know. But
What?
if you'd like a spooky October and you feel like your skin should crawl and make it so you'll never want to take a lake house vacation ever again, pick up The Nice House on the Lake from DC Black Label at the moment and give it a read. That's our next one for October, which we'll record at the end of October and release just in time for Halloween.
Will we?
Probably.
Okay. All right.
We haven't spoken about this, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, that's
so,
pretty soon,
you know.
Ben.
It's tomorrow, isn't it?
Yeah,
Oh, it's tomorrow.
That's only three.
Yeah,
That's only 3 weeks.
essentially.
All right. Well, I better
But-
fucking get it and read it then.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoyed this episode, do give us a review wherever you listen. We are a relatively new podcast. We weren't always, but we are now in our monthly iteration, and we need reviews to give us an L boost.
Give us a boost.
Give us an L boost.
Give us an
ladies
L
and gentlemen.
boost.
Do it. Hop up there and give us an L boost. But that's it. You can find us wherever you listen. All the links are down below in the description. Enjoy your time. This has been fabulous. I really enjoyed that comic. Let us know what you think. Bye-bye.
See you next time. Bye. Watch out for spooky stuff on Superman.